Is the bill be read a second time? The Honourable Wilson Tucker.
Thank you, Acting President. Acting President, I felt compelled to say a few things on this bill because I think the last time I heard the word electoral being uttered in the title of a bill, ignoring the Honourable Dr. Brad Pettit's private members bill, was back in 2021 when we dealt with a very controversial and a very impactful piece of legislation. And I'm still suffering from a little bit of PTSD, you could probably say, as a result of that bill, because I found myself as really the Trojan horse, you could say, and the reason, the justification that was given by the former Premier at the time, the Honourable Mark McGowan, for the purpose of that bill. And it felt like it was a bill that was being heralded as achieving electoral equality, but I think we know, obviously, the real reason for that bill. And I've learned a few sayings in the last 2.5 years in this time, and one of them is you don't form a committee unless you know the outcome of that committee, and the same also applies with the intentions of a bill. You don't bring a bill into fruition unless you know the outcome of the consequences of that bill, and that's exactly what we saw with entrenching Labor's position and really helping their incumbency with that electoral bill. Now, and this one, I guess the parallels with history are repeating themselves once again. So this has been heralded as something that gives more transparency, and I think it goes a little bit of way in doing that. But I think the cynic in me, and I think the last 2.5 years have probably made me a little bit of a cynic. Really, I think it is window dressing in terms of it could go a lot further, but I think the real intention of that bill is obviously the Labor Party has crunched the numbers, they've done the math, and they know that this is going to help them in the long run. I heard the figure of $3 million being bandied around that 4% threshold, and then the money flowing back into the party coffers, which is obviously a very significant amount of money. The Acting President, the main points I think I'll try and really drill out of, and I really want to get into, I think, are best reserved for committee. I think at this stage, in terms of the second reading, there's a couple of points I want to make, and it's really around the entrenchment that the Labor Party is giving to themselves through this bill, and that 4%. I understand that is going to make WA bring us in line with the other jurisdictions. That is fine, but it is really entrenching the support, or I guess the favouritism is probably the right word, but the advantage that major parties do have over the minor parties. So if you're not hitting that 4%, it's going to be more incredibly difficult because you're dealing with the other ramifications of this bill, but you're not getting the reimbursement, you're not getting the flow-on effects that come with that. You're not getting those millions of dollars flowing into you, but you're having to deal with the other consequences of the bill. And the majority of those consequences are good. When we talk about accountability, transparency, absolutely. I'm not here to oppose them, but these are things where the minor parties have to really comply at the same level as the major parties, but they're not getting that favouritism that comes along with this bill. The other part I'll quickly talk about now is the justification and the reason for this bill. And we heard from the Honourable Dr. Steve Thomas around, I guess, some of the shallow justification of this bill from the Labor Party. We got a history lesson, which I do appreciate. My history, when we talk about anything electoral, goes back to 2016, when I founded the Daylight Saving Party and did contest the 2017 election, and of course 2021, which brought me into this place. And so I do appreciate the history lesson of members with a lot more lineage than myself. But the other point I would like to talk about is the justification and the reasons that the Honourable Roger Cook, our now Premier, has made in relation to this bill. We're talking about near real-time disclosure now, and I guess the impost and the burden that parties have to bear to comply. And that was used as a justification for that 4% reimbursement, which is measured in the millions, which is a significant amount of money. Now, that centralisation, so during the briefing that I did receive, I asked the question about how parties are going to comply. I think it's within that 24-hour window. All parties have to disclose during an election period when the writ is handed down. All parties will have to ensure that their donations are made public. Now, that can be quite a burden, certainly on parties, but a WAC is actually going to take a lot of that burden off the parties. Now, this is actually a pretty good pattern. If you look at this from a software development lens, we're talking about centralisation rather than reinventing the wheel for all these other organisations to basically just replicate functionality that they all need to do, and centralise it into a place where the functionality makes a lot of sense. So the WAC will do a lot of that heavy lifting. So it really just comes down to parties who receive those donations to then disclose those donations. Like I'm struggling to see where the justification for millions of dollars is required when we talk about 24-hour window for parties to disclose their donations. And so that is something I think we can certainly drill into committee, but I think it is a shallow argument to make, or in the case of history, I think it is window dressing. It's a shallow justification for this bill, and it is one that doesn't benefit. It only benefits the major parties, for those parties that are attracting over that 4%, not for the minor parties. That is the main point I will make. I reserve my judgment about this bill. I have listened intently to all the members here. I am still largely on the fence. I think there are some good bits when we talk about disclosure, transparency and accountability. But I think once burnt, twice shy when it comes to the intention, the true intention of the Labor Party when it comes to any bill with the title of electoral in the name. So I look forward to the committee stage.
The question is